Aquatica 7. A world draped in perpetual twilight submerged beneath a crushing ocean. Here the Kryll, a species of bioluminescent crustacean-like warriors, maintained an iron grip on order. Their lives revolved around the patrol, a ceaseless ballet of submersibles and sonar, ensuring every ripple, every shadow conformed to the High Commander's decree. The Kryll were a study in rigid uniformity. Each soldier, or Kryll guard, was equipped with bioengineered exoskeletons and programmed with unwavering loyalty. Their society was a symphony of clicks, whistles, and pulsating light patterns, a language of command, obedience, and utter pragmatism. Emotions were considered a weakness, individuality a threat. Into this world of aquatic automatons drifted Elias Thorne, a human poet with a penchant for the absurd and an utter disregard for protocol. He'd arrived on Aquatica 7 aboard a repurposed transport freighter, his only luggage a battered suitcase filled with notebooks and an antique typewriter. His mission, as he understood it, was to experience the universe and write about it, or something. Elias found a niche for himself in a forgotten corner of the capital city, a colossal underwater metropolis of coral and steel. Ignoring the Kryll guard's suspicious glares, he set up his writing desk near a hydrothermal vent, the rhythmic bursts of heat somehow soothing to his artistic soul. The chaos of Aquatica 7 was strangely inspiring to him, though he'd be hard-pressed to explain why. Oblivious to the complex security scans and behavioral analyses he triggered with every move, Elias began his work. He tapped away at his typewriter, the clattering echoing oddly in the filtered water of his temporary home. He'd often pause, gazing out at the passing Kryll patrols, a bemused expression on his face. His appearance alone was an affront to Kryll sensibilities. His soft, fleshy form, his loose, unfitted clothing, his unsettlingly asymmetrical face, all screamed anomaly in their meticulously catalogued database of acceptable life forms. They simply couldn't compute him. One day, as a particularly large Kryll patrol swam past his dwelling, Elias decided to engage. He cleared his throat and, in a voice amplified by the water, began to recite a sonnet he'd been working on. It was a whimsical piece about a lonely star and a lovesick nebula, filled with metaphors that made absolutely no sense in a marine context. The Kryll halted, their bioluminescent patterns shifting from operational blue to an agitated red. Sonar. Pings bounced off Elias's dwelling, growing in intensity. The lead Kryll guard, designated Unit 734, exchanged a series of rapid clicks with his squad, a silent debate raging over how to handle this disturbance. Elias, blissfully unaware of the alarm he was causing, continued his recital. He punctuated each line with dramatic gestures, his long hair swirling around his face in the current. He imagined he was bringing a touch of beauty to this sterile world. He could not have been more wrong. Unit 734, after a tense moment of deliberation, made its decision. This bizarre, fleshy creature was clearly a threat. Its illogical sounds, its erratic movements, its complete disregard for the patrol's authority, all pointed to a single conclusion. Elias Thorne was an agent of chaos, and he needed to be neutralized. The order was given. The Kryll patrol surged forward, their bioengineered claws extended, ready to apprehend the poet and his dangerous poetry. Elias, mid-sonnet, didn't notice the shift in the patrol's posture until it was far too late. One moment he was lost in the lyrical beauty of his own verse. The next he was surrounded by heavily armored Kryll guard, their bioluminescent eyes glowing menacingly. Before he could utter another line, he was seized. The Kryll, accustomed to swift, decisive action, wasted no time. They clamped restraints around Elias's wrists and ankles, the cold metal constricting his movements. A translator device, normally used for interspecies communication, was forcefully attached to his throat, ready to interpret his every utterance, or, more likely, to silence him if necessary. "Hey, now hold on a minute," Elias protested, his voice slightly distorted by the translator. "I was just sharing a little poetry. You know, art, culture." His words were met with blank stares and the clicking of Kryll mandibles. They clearly had no idea what he was talking about. To the Kryll, Elias's sonnet was anything but art. The nonsensical metaphors, the emotional undertones, the utter lack of strategic value. It all pointed to a coded message, a declaration of war disguised as flowery language. The mention of burning stars and turbulent seas only confirmed their suspicions. This was a deliberate provocation. As he was being dragged through the corridors of the underwater city, Elias tried to explain himself. It's a sonnet. 14. Lines, a specific rhyme scheme. Shakespeare? Anyone? He received only tighter grips from his captors and the occasional disconcerting pulse of sonar. They clearly weren't fans of the bard. The Kryll patrol moved with ruthless efficiency, their movements precise and synchronized. They navigated the labyrinthine city with ease, their exoskeletons brushing against the coral walls and steel structures. Elias, on the other hand, stumbled and struggled, his soft body ill-suited for this harsh aquatic environment. Word of Elias's arrest spread quickly through the Kryll network. Speculation ran rampant. Was he a spy, a saboteur, or something even more sinister? The High Commander himself was alerted and preparations were made for a full interrogation. This human, with his strange words and even stranger behavior, was a puzzle that needed to be solved for the safety of Aquatica 7. Little did the Kryll know, their overreaction to a simple sonnet would soon unravel the very foundations of their rigid society. Elias's poetry, intended to inspire beauty and connection, was about to become the catalyst for chaos, confusion, and perhaps a touch of enlightenment. The sonnet incident had set the stage for a cultural collision of epic proportions. Elias found himself hauled before the Kryll High Commander, a formidable figure even by Kryll standards. The commander, whose carapace gleamed with battle scars and whose bioluminescent eyes pulsed with authority, regarded him with an intensity that could melt glaciers, if there were any on Aquatica 7. The interrogation chamber was a stark, utilitarian space, the walls lined with glowing panels displaying complex data streams. Human, the commander boomed, the translator rendering his guttural clicks into surprisingly clear galactic standard. You are accused of uttering poetry. Explain yourself. Elias swallowed, trying to appear less terrified than he actually was. Well, it's like I said, poetry. It's a form of expression, a way of capturing emotions, ideas, beauty, even. He gestured vaguely with his restrained hands. You know, with words. The commander tilted his head, a gesture that Elias interpreted as something between confusion and disgust. Emotions, beauty, these are irrelevant. Efficiency and order are the foundations of Kryll society. Right, efficiency. I get it, Elias stammered. But poetry can be efficient too. Like, it can convey a lot of meaning in a small package. A really, really small package. Like a haiku. You guys like small packages, right? 'Cause you live underwater and... He trailed off, realizing he was digging himself deeper. The Kryll guards flanking him shifted uncomfortably, their mandibles clicking in what Elias suspected was a Kryll, equivalent of nervous throat clearing. The High Commander, however, remained impassive. Explain this haiku, the commander demanded, his voice devoid of any inflection. Elias racked his brain, trying to come up with a suitable example. Okay, coral sways gently, sunlight dances on the reef, patrol boat looming. He winced. Okay. Maybe not the best example for this particular situation. The High Commander stared at him for a long, silent moment. This haiku contains 3 distinct observations. The first, a benign description of flora. The second, an acknowledgement of solar activity. The third, he paused, his bioluminescent eyes narrowing, is a threat assessment. You are admitting to observing our patrol patterns? Elias threw his head back. This is hopeless. It's just a poem. It's not supposed to be analyzed like a military strategy document. The Kryll High Commander slammed a clawed hand on the table, the sound echoing through the chamber. Everything is a strategy, human. Every action, every utterance, every poem serves a purpose. What is yours? Elias sighed. My purpose? To write poems, to explore the universe and find inspiration, to maybe sell a few copies back on Earth if I'm lucky. The commander turned to one of his aides who was frantically tapping on a datapad. The aide whispered something in Kryll to the commander, who then turned back to Elias with renewed suspicion. This Earth, records indicate it is a Class 7 chaotic civilization. Their primary exports are entertainment and art. They are known for their illogical behavior and unpredictable cultural trends. Hey now, some of our trends are perfectly logical, Elias protested weakly. Like, wearing socks with sandals? Okay, maybe not. The commander ignored him. Your claims of artistic intent are dubious. We believe this poetry is a form of sophisticated psychological warfare, a means of disrupting our thought processes, undermining our resolve. Psychological warfare? Elias burst out laughing. With a sonnet? You think I'm trying to defeat you with rhyme schemes? The Kryll guards exchanged worried glances. The commander, however, remained stoic. We do not understand this humor, human. Explain its purpose. Elias opened his mouth to explain, then closed it again. How could he explain humor to a species that valued efficiency above all else? It was like trying to explain the color blue to someone who had never seen the sky. It's complicated, he finally said. It's a way of releasing tension, finding joy in the absurd, making fun of ourselves. The Kryll High Commander frowned. Making fun of yourselves? Why would anyone intentionally diminish their own standing? Elias shrugged. Because sometimes it's funny? The commander shook his head, his bioluminescent eyes dimming slightly. This is illogical. This is deeply unsettling. The Kryll were designed for logical thinking, for tactical planning, for unwavering obedience. Faced with the apparent irrationality of human art, they were completely out of their element. Elias's poetry, his attempts at humor, were not just baffling. They were a threat to the very foundations of their society. As the interrogation continued, Elias realized that he wasn't just being questioned, he was being studied. The Kryll were trying to dissect his mind, to understand the workings of a human artist, to unravel the mystery of poetry. And the more they learned, the more confused and just perhaps a little bit intrigued they became. The tension ratcheted up another notch when the Kryll discovered Elias's pen. It had been lying innocently on the table in his cell, next to a crumpled napkin filled with hastily scribbled verses. To the Kryll, however, it was anything but innocent. The lead scientist, a Kryll with particularly elaborate sensory antennae, approached the pen with extreme caution. He wore a full biohazard suit, his movements slow and deliberate. This artifact, he announced through the comms, his voice echoing in the observation room, is undoubtedly the source of the humans' disruptive influence. The pen was carefully transported to a high-security research lab, a gleaming white space filled with complex machinery and holographic displays. Kryll scientists, their faces obscured by protective gear, swarmed around it, their instruments whirring and clicking. They scanned it, X-rayed it, subjected it to a battery of tests, but the pen remained stubbornly enigmatic. Its composition is rudimentary, one scientist reported, his voice laced with disbelief. A simple polymer casing, a metallic tip, a reservoir containing pigmented fluid. The Kryll High Commander, observing the proceedings from a secure viewing platform, frowned. Pigmented fluid? What purpose could such a substance serve? We are uncertain, Commander, the lead scientist replied. But our analysis suggests it is highly concentrated, capable of leaving visible marks on various surfaces. The commander's bioluminescent eyes narrowed. Visible marks? Is it a form of code? A means of communication? The scientists ran further tests, attempting to decipher the pen's secrets. They analyzed the molecular structure of the ink, searching for hidden messages or subversive elements. They even subjected it to extreme temperatures and pressures, but the pen remained unchanged, its simple form defying their sophisticated technology. Its simplicity is unsettling, one scientist remarked. It is as if the human intentionally designed it to be unassuming, to lull us into a false sense of security. The Kryll, a species accustomed to complex weaponry and intricate technology, were completely baffled by the pen's utter lack of sophistication. They couldn't comprehend how such a seemingly innocuous object could be responsible for Elias's strange behavior, his disruptive poetry, his unsettling humor. Panic began to ripple through the Kryll ranks. If this simple pen could be so perplexing, what other hidden dangers lurked within human culture? They initiated a planet-wide defense protocol, preparing for an all-out assault. "We must be prepared for anything," the High Commander declared. "This pen may be just the first wave of a much larger attack. We must fortify our defenses, strengthen our resolve, and protect our society from the corrosive influence of human art." Aquatica 7 went on high alert. Patrols were doubled, security checkpoints were reinforced, and citizens were instructed to report any suspicious activity, especially anything involving writing. The Kryll were convinced they were on the verge of a major crisis, a cultural invasion that threatened to undermine everything they held dear. Little did they know, the real crisis was about to be drawn. Elias watched the Kryll scientists, a mixture of amusement and despair swirling within him. He understood their fear, their inability to grasp something so simple. In their world of complex technology and rigid logic, a pen was an anomaly, a threat. He had to do something, anything, to break through their fear-induced paranoia. "Look," he said, his voice echoing in the sterile lab. "It's just a pen. I use it to write, to draw. It's not a weapon, it's a tool for expression." The Kryll, High Commander, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with suspicion, remained unconvinced. "Expression? What strategic advantage does this expression provide?" Elias sighed. He grabbed a discarded piece of plasteel from the table, its surface smooth and cold. All right, let me show you." He uncapped the pen, the faint click, sounding deafeningly loud in the tense silence. He began to draw, his hand moving swiftly across the plasteel. He sketched a Kryll warrior, capturing the intricate details of its exoskeleton, the menacing curve of its mandibles, the cold, calculating gaze in its multifaceted eyes. He worked quickly, instinctively, pouring all his frustration and a strange sort of admiration into the drawing. The Kryll watched him, their antennae twitching nervously. They didn't understand what he was doing, but they couldn't deny the intensity, the focus, the sheer artistry of his movements. Finally, he finished. He held up the plasteel, displaying the drawing to the assembled Kryll. The image was stark, powerful, undeniably Kryll. The Kryll were initially unimpressed. It was, after all, just a picture, a representation of something they saw every day. But as they gazed at the drawing, something began to shift within them. One of the younger scientists, his voice barely a whisper, spoke first. It looks like Sergeant Kryll 9, but different." Another Kryll, a seasoned warrior with countless battles under his belt, stared intently at the drawing. It captures the essence of a Kryll warrior. The strength, the discipline, the burden of duty." A murmur rippled through the ranks. The Kryll, a species devoid of artistic expression, were experiencing something entirely new: emotion. The drawing, with its simple lines and subtle shading, was evoking feelings within them that they had never known existed. The High Commander, his faceplate betraying nothing, felt a strange stirring in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but the drawing resonated with him. It was more than just a picture. It was a glimpse into the soul of a Kryll warrior, a soul he didn't even know existed. Suddenly, a Kryll let out a strange gurgling sound. It took Elias a moment to realize it was laughter. Another Kryll joined in, then another, until the lab was filled with the sound of Kryllian amusement. They were laughing at the drawing, at themselves, at the absurdity of the situation. The laughter was infectious, liberating. It was a release of tension, a breaking of the rigid constraints that had defined their society for centuries. And it all started with a simple drawing, created with a simple pen by a simple human poet. The laughter subsided, leaving a sense of stunned silence in its wake. Elias, still holding the plasteel drawing, looked at the Kryll, his expression a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Had he actually gotten through to them? Had he, with a single drawing, managed to crack the impenetrable shell of Kryllian logic? The High Commander stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes narrowed in contemplation. "Human," he said, his voice unusually subdued. "Explain yourself. Why were you sent here? What is the purpose of this art?" Elias hesitated. He hadn't been briefed on the specifics, only given a vague mission statement about fostering understanding. He wasn't a diplomat, wasn't a spy. He was just a poet, adrift in a galaxy that had little use for poetry. "Well," Elias began, scratching his head, "it's a bit complicated. You see, back on Earth, some people thought that, well, that maybe you guys were a bit too serious, a bit too militaristic." The High Commander's antennae twitched, a sign of rising irritation. "And your solution was to send a poet?" "Yeah, well, not just any poet," Elias said defensively. "I'm a pretty good poet, if I do say so myself. And the idea was that maybe, just maybe, if I could introduce you guys to art, to poetry, to emotions, that you might see things differently, that you might lighten up a bit." The Kryll stared at him, their multifaceted eyes unblinking. The concept was so alien, so illogical, that they struggled to process it. They had expected a weapon, a virus, some form of advanced technology. Instead, they got a poet. "You mean," the High Commander said slowly, "that your government sent you here to Aquatica 7, not as a diplomat, not as a spy, but as an artist? To make us feel things?" Elias shrugged. "Pretty much. I know, it sounds crazy, right? But hey, sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that work." The revelation hung in the air, heavy with absurdity. The Kryll, a species renowned for their strategic brilliance and unwavering logic, had been outmaneuvered not by a superior weapon, but by a simple act of artistic expression. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. The implications of Elias's mission began to dawn on the Kryll. Their entire society was built on a foundation of logic, duty, and unwavering obedience. Emotions were seen as a weakness, a distraction, a threat to the collective good. But the drawing, the laughter, the strange stirring they felt within themselves, it was undeniable. Art had the power to move them, to change them, to make them question everything they had ever believed. The Kryllian High Command was thrown into disarray. Debates raged, arguments flared, and for the first time in centuries the Kryll began to question their values, their traditions, their very way of life. Was there more to existence than strategic planning and military conquest? Was there value in emotions and self-expression in art? Elias watched the chaos unfold, a strange sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had come to Aquatica 7 expecting to fail, expecting to be dismissed as a harmless eccentric. Instead, he had inadvertently sparked a revolution, a cultural upheaval that threatened to shatter the foundations of Kryllian society. The pen, once seen as a weapon of unimaginable power, was now viewed as a symbol of something far more dangerous: change. And Elias Thorne, the humble human poet, had become the unlikely catalyst for that change. And so, Aquatica 7 tentatively began to embrace art. Murals, crude but colorful, started appearing on the once sterile walls of Kryllian cities. Statues, sculpted from coral and seashells, adorned public squares. The Kryll, a species that had never known the joy of creation, were now discovering the simple pleasure of making something beautiful, or at least, attempting to. The shift wasn't easy. Generations of rigid conditioning couldn't be undone overnight. Many Kryll still viewed art with suspicion, seeing it as a frivolous distraction from their sacred duty. But slowly, gradually, the seeds of change began to sprout. Perhaps the most surprising transformation was that of the High Commander himself. Initially skeptical, he found himself strangely drawn to the human concept of poetry. He started spending hours in his private chambers scribbling away at plasteel tablets, attempting to capture his thoughts and feelings in verse. The results by any objective measure were atrocious. His poems were filled with clumsy metaphors, awkward rhymes, and a complete lack of emotional nuance. But despite their artistic failings, they represented a profound shift in his thinking. He was trying to connect with his species on a level that went beyond strategy and tactics, to tap into the shared well of human, or rather, Kryllian, experience. He even started sharing his poems with his staff, much to their bewildered amusement. They struggled to decipher the meaning behind his bizarre verses, but they appreciated the gesture. It was a sign that their leader was changing, that he was willing to embrace new ideas, even if those ideas were utterly ridiculous. Elias, meanwhile, had become an unlikely cultural hero. He was revered as the poet of peace, the human who had brought art and understanding to Aquatica 7. He gave lectures on human art and culture, patiently explaining the nuances of rhyme and rhythm, the power of metaphor and simile. He even started teaching Kryllian children how to paint, encouraging them to express themselves freely and creatively. He still missed Earth, of course. He longed for the familiar comforts of home, for the taste of real coffee, for the sound of human laughter. But he knew that he had made a difference here, that he had helped to create a better future for the Kryll. One day, the High Commander approached Elias, his multifaceted eyes filled with an uncharacteristic twinkle. "Human," he said, "I have written a new poem. I would be honored if you would listen to it." Elias braced himself. He knew what was coming. He had heard the High Commander's poetry before, and it was not a pleasant experience. But he also knew that this was an important moment, a symbol of the progress that had been made. The High Commander cleared his throat and began to recite, his voice deep and resonant. "The sea is blue, the sky is blue. I like you. Do you like me too?" Elias managed a weak smile. "It's very evocative, sir," he said diplomatically. "The Sioux," High Commander beamed. "Thank you, human. I call it Ode to Reciprocity." Elias shook his head, a mixture of amusement and affection washing over him. He still had a lot of work to do, but he knew that he was on the right track. He had brought poetry to the stars, and in doing so, he had brought a little bit of humanity with him. The galaxy, it seemed, was finally ready to listen.